when we interfere with our fertility through birth control, through IVF, through just even delaying it to the last minute, right? Our bodies are designed to have children. And so much can be thrown off when we mess with those hormones and when we mess with, that design. And I think if we look at media, successful women are often portrayed as either single and or childless. They aren't portrayed as successful family women. And I think that's the message that young girls are also receiving. If I want to be a successful, high-powered, career-oriented, whatever it might be, a family doesn't factor into that until maybe I decide I want it down the line. Motherhood is also a calling and a career choice that you can make. And it's not the opposite of success. It's just a different choice, a different path. And not everyone will want it, but a lot of women do.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to my podcast. Thank you for tuning in. Today, I'm going to have a conversation in Canada, in Abbotsford, British Columbia, with Anna Nienhuis. And Anna is a communication professional for a very interesting, you tell me what it's called. Now, I found it, but there it is. Association for Reformed Political Action, Canada. So maybe we could just start by, you could explain what the association is, and then we'll get into particulars.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Welcome, very welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great to do this. So the Association for Reformed Political Action, we call it ARPA. Basically, it's a Christian political advocacy organization working on a wide range of social issues, everything from euthanasia, pornography, prostitution, gender, and specifically, I also work a lot on the issue of abortion through our We Need a Law campaign. So just trying to bring a biblical perspective on a lot of those different topics and trying to bring that into the public square, also intervening in the courts and just making sure that the public has opportunity and resources to get engaged in the political realm on a lot of those issues.
And how would they get engaged from what you do?
So we have a lot of different resources. So we do the research and policy reports, but we also have, we'll draft email campaigns or postcards they can send. We really encourage them to meet with their member of parliament, to call them, to get to know their representatives who are representing them. Mm-hmm. Let them know what issues matter to them, that they're keeping an eye on them, get them to phone about those things, just really communicate. And then also we have flyers they can distribute in their communities. We have different displays they can do in their communities to have those conversations locally and just get more and more Canadians aware of what's happening on those issues, what the government is doing on those issues, because often people aren't following what the government is doing. So letting them know if bills have been introduced or if bills need to be introduced, if something needs to be changed.
So it's with the legacy media having more trouble getting our messages out through legacy media. How do you manage that otherwise?
So we have a really extensive newsletter list. We do a lot of newsletters, keeping people up to date on what we're working on, also sharing resources like news articles and things that you can no longer share in other places. So we do a lot of newsletters. We do in-person presentations. We do have a lot of local chapters, so volunteers that work locally on the ground in different communities around Canada that work within their own faith communities and also within their broader community to bring those messages.
And how wide are you spread out over Canada?
So we're a national organization. Our head office is in Ottawa. We also have an office here in BC. We have staff in Alberta. And then we have some staff that also are starting to serve the Maritimes and areas where we haven't actually done a lot so far, but where we've had requests to get involved and engaged.
So we were in Miami not too long ago, and then we had to fly to Arizona, and it took nearly 5 hours, right? And then it's another hour to the West Coast. And in Canada, often we fly from Atlantic Canada to Toronto area, or we fly from BC to Ottawa. But we usually don't do the entire flight, which would take us all the way to Atlantic Canada. These are very large countries.
Yes.
And the communication, to have communication go all the way internationally or nationally is a challenge, I would think, because traveling that distance is an undertaking.
Absolutely.
To say the least.
Yeah, and that's where it is great to have things like online communication through newsletters and also through Zoom meetings or things like that, where we can connect with our local chapters. And we have school clubs as well. So connecting with those organizations so that they can do that work where they are, because, we're not a huge organization. We can't be everywhere.
Right.
You're right. Yeah.
So it's in the schools. And what other kinds of organizations would you have access to?
Yeah, so the chapters are usually all adults, usually from a Reformed church, because we're a Reformed Christian organization. So within the churches, there'll be representatives who coordinate a group and meet together to do action items like meeting together with their member of parliament or getting together to do, say, a flag display, drawing attention to the issue of abortion. So they coordinate a lot of those local efforts, or they bring in someone to do a presentation on one of the issues, things like that.
What do you mean you're a Reformed?
So the Reformed Church is across Canada as well. And so ARPA, our organization, came out of the Reformed Church. I'm not familiar with the Reformed Church. Oh, okay. So the Reformed Church is basically just a biblical-based church. So there's lots of different Reformed denominations so we work with a lot of those. There's Heritage Reformed, Canadian Reformed, Free Reformed. There's a United Reformed, quite a variety of Reformed denominations across Canada.
How long has that been around? Because I don't think that we had a Reformed church when I was young.
Okay, so
Do you know how long it's been around?
Like the particular denomination I'm in, the Canadian Reformed, it's actually just celebrating 75 years.
Oh, okay. So it has been
quite
around
a while.
For a long time. Oh, well, I didn't know that. And so how is it different from the United Church, the Anglican Church, the Catholic Church, the Seventh-day Adventist, like all of that? How is it associated with those or different from them?
Yeah, so some of the confessions we would share in terms of the Apostles' Creed, some of those, the Belgic Confession that a lot of different churches would have.
Yeah.
But we also come out of the Reformation, the roots of the Reformation in Europe, and how that kind of shifted away from Roman Catholicism into the more Protestant. So it'd be a Protestant history more.
Right.
So if that...
Yep, I see. Fair enough. Let's start with abortion legislation in Canada and its history, so people have a good understanding of where we're going to start from.
Yeah, so abortion until 1969 was illegal in Canada, and after that it became legal under the approval of what they called therapeutic abortion committees. So there was a lot of conflict around that. The idea was that a woman had to go to a hospital, to a therapeutic abortion committee of 3 people who would approve the abortion. So in the 80s, a lot of work was done challenging that. And in the end, what happened was the Supreme Court struck down that law and said that was unconstitutional and expected Parliament to make a new law. And Parliament never did. So we're actually the only democratic country in the world that has absolutely no law, no restrictions on abortion. There's no legal limits on abortion. And that's kind of this legal vacuum we've ended up with. And just this morning in the National Post, I saw an article saying that the issue was so divisive in the 80s, basically, that the country got exhausted and gave up. So we've ended up in this place where we have no legal protection for preborn children, and they aren't even recognized as human beings under the law until they're fully born. So then we end up with cases like a pregnant woman being murdered, and we can't count the baby as a victim because it's not a human being under the law. So we end up with this legal void, and we're approaching now 40 years with no abortion law. So we advocate for protections for preborn children, for saying, okay, we know unequivocally from science that this is a human being, and at some point we have a responsibility to that child to protect it. And so where can we start? And what we've found is with our We Need a Law campaign, we really seek to find common ground with Canadians to get rid of kind of this polarized debate where you can't get anywhere and say, where do we have common ground? And when we start bringing in specifics like sex-selective abortion or late-term abortions or the preborn victims of crime, like I mentioned, we find that the vast majority of Canadians aren't okay with abortion in all circumstances for any reason. So trying to build on that and bring our government along too, to say, for so long, this has been such a polarizing wedge issue that no one wants to talk about. But if you talk about this in a reasonable way, Canadians are not opposed to restrictions on abortion. And it's just because it's become this really black and white polarized debate that so often instead children are just used as a wedge issue. And we see that in Canada. Again, we're in an election period right now for a federal election. And we get this fear mongering and this don't vote for that person because of their position on abortion. And we don't have leaders standing up and saying, I have no problem saying that I would restrict abortion in this case. And we don't have anyone willing to stand up and say that. Mm-hmm. So that's what we work towards.
That sounds like a necessary conversation to have. And it was interesting. My husband had a podcast with a congressman who was congressman under the Trump administration and then put in prison during the Biden administration and then pardoned by Trump. So he came and did a podcast with George. And he said that he would be sent in the world to where there was a conflict. And he, as a young man, he would think, well, if you take out the leader, then democracy will rise. He learned through his negotiations that that's not how things work. It isn't always the good that rises. So you can't just take off the top. You have to find common ground for these people. You have to find what's common among the people. And he was able to take 6 world strifes that were 2 nations that were against one another and solve them with common ground. So, this is definitely, he had an inspiration. He was inspired to look at it differently, which is to look for common ground rather than to look for division. Mm-hmm. And because division just brings more division.
Yes.
Yeah, right. So that's a good policy. And I think, especially now with the election coming, this is good timing for this podcast. That's what I think. Okay, let's see. Common ground. Mm-hmm. And we talk about abortion being, we have to talk about abortion, but it seems like it's almost too late. Once you're talking about abortion, then there's been so many mistakes made by that time, then it's no wonder that this mistake is very difficult to navigate because it's based on the decisions that were made previously to that brought you to this like pivotal position where you are stuck, where you're stuck. And so where we're stuck, that's the outcome. That's the outcome. But what about the process? So maybe we could talk about what's happened previously that's brought men and women to this place where they can't negotiate it. And it's no wonder.
Absolutely. I think that's such a good point, that abortion is actually so far down the line of what's happened. And that's really important to remember because we say, okay, if 100,000 more babies were born every year, obviously things are going to have to change down the line in society to care for those children if abortion is off the table. And so it's looking at how did we end up with women and their children pitted against each other, that it's like this idea of motherhood is not success and motherhood's an impediment to success. And abortion is a solution because we can't have both of you and your child. And I think also for women, this sense of responsibility they have that it's all on them. And abortion tells them to succeed in society, you need to be more like a man. Your fertility needs to be tamped down, and this is not going to be something they have to deal with. This is now your problem. And so it gives men also this freedom to not be responsible for the children that they are involved in making, so that it gives them the ability to say, oh, I'll pay for your abortion or I'll send you there, and then the problem's gone. And if you decide, as a woman, if we decide, no, that's not what I want, that's all on you. So we really have ended up in this society where we've kind of pitted men and women and children against each other, rather than creating a society that says, we value life. How can we make this work? If we're going to say, this is a human life, we value human life, and we want human rights for all human life, then how can we play that out? And so the pro-life movement has a beautiful pastoral arm that does pregnancy care centers. They care for new moms. They provide resources and support and parenting classes and all these wonderful things. And those are the organizations that are going to be also well suited to support women if abortion is restricted. Those organizations know what to do. They have systems in place. It's not going to be the government that knows how to help women, right? It's going to be those kind of organizations. And yet we see under Justin Trudeau as Prime Minister, threats to take away funding for pregnancy care centers, threats to remove their charitable status because they aren't offering abortion. And that just shows such a it's such like an abortion-focused approach. It's not even saying we actually want women to have other choices. It's saying this is the choice. And it's just trying to push women in one direction rather than acknowledging that they might want to make a different choice and are going to need support in that, which is longer term support and more costly support, right? Like all of those things, it's going to take more effort to keep a child than not. So I think recognizing that there are organizations really well suited to do that. And the government hasn't shown any support for those organizations if they aren't in line with their own beliefs. And I think for the government too, to see that this is a conversation Canadians are willing and able to have, and they don't need to be protected from it. Women don't need to be protected from what the options are, and to be able to let them have that freedom to thrive as a mother as well would be really beautiful to see.
I interviewed a young man who had a nonprofit a pro-life nonprofit, and it was very interesting. I'm not a computer person, any more than I use them. That's it. But he told me something, and I thought, oh, this is interesting. So he built an app that will, if a woman goes online searching for an abortion clinic, it'll find that algorithm, and it'll interrupt and it'll come into that space and offer an ultrasound free of charge.
Okay.
And so then if the woman sees that, part of her heart is, if her heart is open, then she'll think, maybe I should do that. I should go look and see. And this is being offered. It's not costing me too much or anything. Maybe I can go do this. So then he has women to go do the ultrasound. And if they do see the baby on the ultrasound and they want the baby, then they put in these other things that, while the woman is going to have to carry the baby to term, we have to put everything in place so that she can carry the baby to term. And then once the baby's born, we got to make sure that the baby's going to be taken care of. And so they do all of that as well, but they interrupt this message of this one-sided message and put in another side. And he saved thousands of babies.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So this is good work.
Yeah. Such a beautiful way to use technology.
Yes, that's right. And so, this was an American company, but I imagine we could have a Canadian company that could do that within the Canadian online laws.
Yeah.
Right. So,
this is interesting.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah. The other thing I think of is that, so then we could talk about, I don't know if you want to talk about this, but I'll bring it up. The fact that young girls, even high school girls, are losing their virginity in high schools to men that they're not even thinking about whether they are going to be the father of their baby. And so the idea that a woman looks at a potential mate as a father rather than as a sexual partner, so we've changed that narrative in women's minds. Instead of looking for a father for their children, they're looking for a sexual partner. And that goes to the birth control pill, because if they weren't on the birth control pill, they wouldn't be thinking that way. So then it goes back to the birth control pill. So
like you say, it goes further and further back down the line to how we've told women that sexuality should work, and how we've how we've kind of brought that narrative. What's interesting though is like the most recent stats just came out on abortion in Canada, and that like 16 to 24 age group abortions have really gone down over the years. And the majority of abortions right now are like 24 to 39-year-olds. So it's not, I think often we have this idea of like a teen pregnancy, but I think like you say, things like the birth control pill and sex ed in schools and a lot of those things have brought it to a place that those girls actually aren't getting pregnant that often anymore, which is great that they're being able to learn enough that they're not having to seek out abortions or wanting to seek out abortions at that age, but that we are seeing at this older age this idea that now's not a good time, or the same thing, I guess, this is not someone I want to be the father of this child. A lot of those other relational things. But Yeah, it's interesting when you look at the stats. I think often people have that idea of teen pregnancy and abortion, but really recognizing that it's something like 75% are in a much higher age bracket.
Well, and if that is from the birth control pill, then that's another question I have, because I know from listening that doctors are offering girls who've just started having their period to go on the birth control pill in order to make their cycle more normalized, or whatever excuse they give. There's many reasons to take the birth control pill, but the foremost reason is so that it stops pregnancy. And that also is a questionable ethical choice. Yeah?
Yeah, I would say so. And I think it's not encouraging women in a healthy direction, because things like STDs impact women so much more than men, and the birth control doesn't prevent that. So encouraging them to be sexually active is actually opening them up to a lot more potential harm as well, even if you take pregnancy out of the equation. That's some of those STDs are lifelong implications too. And I think
and side effects of the pill too.
Yes,
like depression is a big side effect of the pill. And we don't talk about that. And I wonder, when I look at the unrest of the young women that we see online in universities, and gathering outside in groups and activist kind of situations, and they seem so emotionally charged. I wonder if that isn't because they're on the birth control pill, because it can really cause emotional dysregulation, really.
Absolutely.
Depression, but also provocativeness. And I mean, I'm not sure. I don't yet have any evidence medically that that's the case, but I wonder, because so many people are put on the birth control pill, what that's doing to young women's states, psychological states.
Yeah. And I know that for myself when I was on it, and for friends of mine, the emotional results weren't worth it to me. It was, like you say, that dysregulation, the depression, it's massively impactful.
Oh yeah. When I went on the birth control pill, at first it changed. My mom didn't know what was going on. Of course, I didn't have to ask my mother, which didn't help, so she didn't know what was going on, but she was quite a reserved person. So she never even asked me. But I didn't have to tell her, so that wasn't very good. But I found I went on and off of it, not understanding what it was doing to me, mostly because I had left home, and so then I was with new people, and they wouldn't have known how I'd changed, right? So I didn't have an advocate, within a church or in a community or within your family. They can look at you and say, you're not acting like you used to or something. But if you're going off, changing cities or going to university, then it's new people all the time, and they won't know what you used to be like. And so I had this problem of leaving home and going on and off. And when I would go on the pill, I would stop cutting my hair, shaving my legs. I would stop studying. So all my creative impulses would disappear. It was a depressive symptom. And then I'd go off the pill, and I would start back studying and taking care of myself and dressing, in a better way. And anyway, it took me a number of those kind of episodes to learn that it was the birth control that was causing it. But if they put that on a woman when she's, say, 13, she's not even yet a woman to even know what she's going to be like. And so then people just accept that this is what she's like, but it's not. It's a birth control pill. And the effects of that down the road then may even put off marriage and childbearing, and then it's too late and you can't have a baby. So we have so many things that are happening. Not only are people maybe deciding they're not ready in their 20s, but if they take the birth control pill till they're 30, then maybe they don't even have a chance then they have a 50% less chance of having a family.
Absolutely.
Oh, it's such a mess.
And then we also see a lot of fertility interventions where they'll do something like IVF and they'll implant multiple embryos to have a better chance of one of them surviving. And then if, say, all of them survive, they'll do selective abortions to remove the extras, basically. And so there's a lot of, when we interfere with our fertility through birth control, through IVF, through just even delaying it to the last minute, right? Our bodies are designed to have children. And so much can be thrown off when we mess with those hormones and when we mess with, that design. And it is, like you say, to give someone something so young. For us, we were old enough to recognize this is not who I am. I'm not acting like myself. When someone has been that way, as long as they've been in puberty, basically, then it's hard to know. And I think they're told their whole life that you can have this freedom. And I think if we look at media, successful women are often portrayed as either single and or childless. They aren't portrayed as successful family women. And I think that's the message that young girls are also receiving. If I want to be a successful, high-powered, career-oriented, whatever it might be, a family doesn't factor into that until maybe I decide I want it down the line. Instead of seeing it the other way around and saying, like you and I had talked about, you can always have a career. The career can always come, but you can't always control when you have a child.
Right.
And that being able for women to also grow up hearing that message to say motherhood is also a calling and a career choice that you can make. And it's not the opposite of success. It's just a different choice, a different path. And not everyone will want it, but a lot of women do.
Just about everyone,
Most
though.
women do.
Yeah,
And,
there's now more women who don't have it, but it's not planned that they, it's not something that they were planning on being childless. So the idea that career is something that you have to put before family is backwards. It's definitely backwards. And the thing is, when I was 18 years old and I went off to university, I didn't really know what I wanted to study. It wasn't a bad experience to go to university, but I think I stopped 3 times before I decided on a major, and then I had to pretty much put my nose to the grindstone and get myself through the 4 years. So it wasn't really a natural undertaking for me to just go to university and study. There were conflicting motivations that I was having, but that I didn't understand, And I think those were maternal instincts that were clouding what might have been a career journey. And I would say that that's because family and motherhood is something that has to be thought of between really 15 and at the outset 30. So, and we've decided that that's when we have a career. Well, that's just not working. That's not working. There's too many women who are childless at the end of that time. So it's not the right narrative. We have to change that narrative.
I agree. And I think that our society has a vested interest in keeping that narrative because they need women in the workforce. We have an aging population. We have this low replacement rate because fewer people are having children. People are having fewer children. We don't have a replacement rate for the workforce we have if women step out of it for any extended amount of time. So I think we see things like the government offering $10 a day daycare as if this is really great for women. You can, for really cheap, have someone take care of your kids so you can go work. And then they expect women to do that, and women wonder why they don't feel fulfilled. They feel like I'm living the dream that they're telling me I should have, but I'm not feeling fulfilled, or I'm trying to juggle too many things. And I think, like you say, we need to change that narrative and say women working in the home is working. And the idea that isn't work is a lie. And that somehow we've gotten this idea that women, if they say they're a homemaker, they're kind of embarrassed and they're kind of, I'm just a stay-at-home mom. And it's not just, it's something you've chosen to do. And I think workplaces need to recognize if we want women in the workforce and women also want to have children, how can we make that better? How can we have great maternity leave policies or workplaces where you can bring your children or work from home options? And I think I've had very flexible work options, and I recognize that's been a huge blessing for our family, that the flexibility to be able to be home when I needed to work remotely, to go into the office rarely, things like that. Our society is more and more set up for things like that to work.
I had a friend who got pregnant during medical school and had 3 kids. Her husband, he was a PhD educated engineer and busy working, but he worked remotely, and he was there for the kids while she went through medical school. So, I mean, and that's really unorthodox, but it worked.
Absolutely.
Right? So you think, that's not going to be likely. But if you have, and that's why you need a mother and a father, really, because this is very difficult to negotiate, but the negotiation is absolutely necessary, right?
And having that community, like you say, because I think too, my husband, for the first 13 years of our marriage, one or both of us was in school, and I had 5 kids in that time. So it was, obviously not easy, but a lot of figuring out who's doing what, whereas we both had created flexible schedules. So we didn't have a lot of money, but you make that your priority. And I think also then that community coming around. So whether that's people that you know, or whether it's a pregnancy care center. For us, with my first baby, I know when I couldn't breastfeed any longer, my parents paid for formula. And when I went back to university with our third, then we were living with my in-laws for a bit, and she would babysit the kids so that I could go to school. So finding those people who are willing to support life in that really tangible way, and not just say, we support life, we think we're pro-life, but saying, what does that look like in terms of practice? What is that coming into? They're putting their time and their money behind you as a woman to say, you can do this. You can be a mother. You can pursue other dreams. You can do both of these. And you have a village, a community. And I think when people don't have a big family or a church community, sometimes they feel, I don't have that. I don't have a community, or they don't have a spouse. Then I think recognizing there is that community and you can find it and it exists, and to join groups and to go to pregnancy help resources and to go to, join a book club at your library, join a mom's group, join a walking group. Like, there's so much community out there, and people want and need community. No one can do it alone. And I think that idea of independence that we're so fixed on, and is a huge part of why abortion, I think, has been so successful, is because it gives this illusion of independence, of I can determine what's the direction of my life, and I can do it myself. And a baby is so dependent, and so we resent that because they need so much. But recognizing that we're all dependent, we all need community, we all need people. That doesn't stop when we stop needing our mother at home. So being able to be a community member who looks out for others, but also being able to seek out and find community when you need it, to say, I can't do this on my own. Who can come around and help with that? And there will be people. I really believe that.
Yeah. Well, now we've got to the point where we're asking what a woman is, that women want to be individuals. I think that we've lost the understanding of actually what a woman is, because a woman, as far as I'm concerned, and I think historically and religiously, that was Mother Mary with an infant. That's a woman. That's when that's when I felt grown up, when I finally had a baby, and there was a moment where I took. And I was the last of 4 kids in my family, but my husband, he was the first, so there were no grandchildren until I had a baby. And I went home to Saskatchewan, to the lake, and all of the grandparents were there, and the in-laws were there, and I had this little baby bouncing in her jolly jumper, and everyone was completely struck by this baby. And I realized, I'd actually done something. I'd done the best thing I could have done for my husband's family. I had offered something that couldn't be replaced in any other way. It was the best thing I could offer. And I was also relieved because it wasn't about me anymore. I wasn't the center of attention. My daughter was the center of attention. And that was a gift, right? That was a gift. And so we don't understand, young women, that is a natural way to grow old, is in service, is in sacrifice, right? That's the Christian message too, that meaning is found in sacrifice. And so we sacrifice ourselves to our families, and we get back so much love. We get back so much love. So there is been written this way of life, and it's there for all of us, but we've been told, oh, you don't need that message. We can be individuals. Well, look where individuals have got us. Now we're changing. Now we're taking off young women's breasts and changing their genitalia. Like, this is, it's satanistic, really. It's terrible. It's absolutely terrible.
Yeah. And it's that willingness to say that love is sacrifice and service. That's not a popular message, and it's a narrative, I think, that, like you say, it brings so much back to us. We think, oh, we're losing so much, or we're losing freedom, or we're losing finances or opportunities. And it's like, actually, we are gaining so much through sacrifice and service.
Yeah, we didn't have any magazines. We didn't go out for dinner. We didn't make any long distance phone calls. We couldn't afford, because I was staying home. We couldn't afford anything, but I had my community, and I was a long ways from my family. It was just my husband and I. And when my grandmother was ill, I couldn't go home. It was thousands of miles away. So one of my neighbor's mother was in the hospital. So I sent flowers, and we ended up having quite a fruitful relationship after that. And then my cousin had a baby, and well, she was thousands of miles away, and there was nothing I could do about that. So I looked to my community. Oh, there's a family. They're having another baby. Took them a dinner.
Oh, nice.
And then they ended up, because I didn't have a green card and I couldn't work, I ended up taking care of their kids, who were the same age as my kids, under the table for cash, 2 or 3 times a week. So then I had a job. My kids had playmates, and it was perfect. And so it was something, because I was lonely for my family, but I realized, you have to find the people here. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't matter that your family isn't here. That doesn't make them less significant. It just means that you are giving the love that you would give to them, to these people. And the love all goes around, so you don't have to worry that it's not exactly the right person.
Absolutely. Yeah. You live where you are, and you're in that. Yeah. And you trust that, I don't know, we were away from my family too, and you trust that they're having people do the same for them. Like my sisters now who live in Ontario have beautiful communities who, when they have a baby or they're sick and I can't be there, those people bring them things, right?
Yes.
Like, we have to trust we can be that person for people around us, and the people that we love can have those people around them, because people everywhere, like you say, we're not individuals. We're all part of these communities, and we can make our community a better place right where we are.
Yeah. I think if we think of ourselves as individuals and autonomous like that, things start to warp. The reality starts to warp, because we are more complete in community. We're community people. We don't, the more you think of yourself, the more anxious and depressed you become. Mm-hmm. So the more you can live in service to other people's, which is sacrificing your own narrow self-will, then the more fruitful everything becomes. And you find opportunity, and people offer you opportunities, and then you're engaged. And
I think you don't get this divisiveness, because you're getting to know people. And when you really know someone, you don't hate them, right? You get to know them and you think, okay, we might disagree on things, but you also see how much common ground you have as people, where you might still have disagreements, but you don't.
You will have disagreements, but if you've
there.
Put that time in and got to know that other person and learn to listen, because you don't learn to listen until you try to have a relationship with someone, like until you truly want a relationship with someone that you don't want to win, but you want to actually have a relationship.
Right. Yeah.
And I learned that when my mom had dementia, and Jordan had us all do psychological testing and found out that my sister was also showing signs of dementia.
Oh, okay.
She just died in December. But, her and I had kind of I loved to go and see her, and I saw her regularly, but we often had arguments, and I didn't know why we were arguing. But once my husband had said that this one sister of mine looked like she was going down the same road as my mother, I said to him, what can I do, do you think, to improve my relationship with my sister? He said, just listen to her. Just listen, don't say anything. So I spent the rest of the weekend not saying anything. I didn't get in any more trouble, first of all. I know, isn't that something? Surprise. And then at the end of the weekend, we had gone whale watching because we were on Vancouver Island. And then we went to a restaurant to eat. And as soon as we walked into the restaurant, I thought, uh-oh, this isn't a good place. I think it might have been moldy in there. I'm not quite sure, but mold makes me aware of something wrong. That's how I kind of feel when I'm in a moldy place. Anyway, we sat down. She sat across from me and started telling me this story about how Mom and Dad had done everything for me and I'd never done anything by myself. I was 40 by then, know, and I had 2 kids and I lived thousands of miles away from my family with my husband as I was an adult,
Yeah.
But what she said to me, I couldn't understand at the end of that. She said, but you're a good mother. I thought, okay, that makes no sense to me. But as time went by, I realized that she had a tragedy when she was 21. Her fiancé had died in a car crash.
Oh, okay.
And I had been 13. And she saw me at 13 not having had any trouble.
Yeah.
And also cared for and all of that. And she kept that. She held on to that sorrow.
Okay.
And even though she was married and she had other kids, there was always this sorrow that she had never dealt with completely. And that clouded our relationship. And until I listened, she didn't tell me what was really heavy on her heart. And once she did, and she did it 1 year later, about the same time in the summer, but we had 20 years of being best friends.
Okay.
Because I listened.
That's beautiful, yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. So listening and that's kind of a sacrifice because you have to sacrifice what you want to say.
Yeah.
To listen.
Right. You can't jump in and say, but I was 13. Right. It's just about hearing what they were experiencing.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I know. I just kicked my husband. I said, are you listening to what she's saying? This is really interesting. I don't know where this is coming from. But I didn't say anything. I just let her finish. If I wouldn't have let her finish, she wouldn't have really come to the present and seen, oh, but this is who you are. That's not who you are. Oh, but this is who you are. Yeah. So
it's being able to also leave our past somewhat behind. And I think the issue of abortion too, we know that approximately 1 in 4 pregnancies end in abortion. So it impacts a massive number of women. So when we talk about it, we know that a lot of women feel very personally impacted. But to know too that we aren't defined by our past, that we can move forward and have those conversations and trust people to listen. And if people aren't willing to listen, that sometimes that's on them, not on you, right? As the person who has something heavy on their heart or something to share. And I think we have to be open to hearing those stories and listening to women, and women then having the courage to say, I made a choice I'm not proud of, or
right.
And being able to move forward from that and still be able to advocate for life. I think that's a really hard thing for people to do.
You can make amends for the mistakes that you've made in the past.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what we're doing here. That's what I'm doing here. I'm making amends with my younger self, where I didn't make great decisions and didn't have maybe as much guidance as I needed. And so made uninvestigated decisions. They weren't investigated as deeply as they had to be investigated. So then I made decisions that were not in my best interest. And so really talking about these things, and that's why I want to, just say it how I see it.
Yeah.
Just to help young women realize that you got to just think these things through. Find, when you're looking for a boyfriend, you're looking for a father for your children. That's what you're looking for.
And don't waste your time or your body or yourself.
No, there's other things to do, but
your worth is not in that. I think so many people, or women especially, can be told that their worth is in how sexually appealing they are or how many partners want to be with them or things like that. And I think that's not in their best interests at all.
No, the women I've met who were celibate and virginal through high school and their 20s till they were married, they may not have felt like they were the most popular, but they ended up getting married and having kids. And I think that's why people aren't getting married, is because they're already the passion that comes from the sexual desire that grows between a man and a woman that are attracted to one another. If that's taken right to matrimony, it will be taken to matrimony if it's kept intact. If your virginity is kept intact, then you'll get married faster. There's no way you're going to wait till you're 30 to get married if you're celibate and a virgin. And so, we think all of these taboos that were written were nonsense, or those were for people from the past. Yeah. We got to think about what's happening right now and see how people are suffering because of misunderstanding what's been written down in the past.
Absolutely. And saying, are we better off now? Like, women, actually ask yourselves, are we better off because we've said all those things don't matter anymore?
Yeah.
I don't think we are.
I don't think we are. No, I think we are lonely, depressed, and also combative. Women who don't have kids, most of them didn't plan it. They didn't plan it to be that way. Well, that's a tragedy, right? So that's no good if that's how we're organizing things.
Yeah. And I think we've given men a bit of a free pass in terms of commitment and leadership. If they say, women are just available and there's no long-term responsibility, and there's this sense of they don't need to commit and settle down and grow up and be men. And I think we've given them a free pass by trying to.
I agree with that. I think that young women say, "Oh, you can't find a good man anymore. You can't find a man who's worth marrying anymore." And say, "Well, I just watched the new Snow White. Okay. I didn't really want to go, but my husband wanted to go. But anyway, I went to it, and it was It was definitely a feminist narrative. They had changed Snow White into a feminist narrative because the way the story went was Snow White, when she finally got away from the queen, she went to live with these dwarves. Yeah. And so what were the dwarves? Well, they were kind of nondescript. They were just a bunch, a bunch altogether, not individuals, not outstanding in any way, but they were hard workers. They kept their house clean, and they were miners. They were close to the earth. They were men of substance and loyal. Responsibility, loyalty, all of those things. And she had to go there and she had to serve them. Yeah. She had to serve them in order to find her prince. And so we think, young women think now, there's no good men around. Well, have you put yourself out to serve your fellow man, right? To get to know them, to get so that you can converse with them and offer to them what not your body, but your companionship or your ingenuity, like whatever it is, your playfulness, whatever it is, with those people. You want to find a prince, you have to get so that you know how to play with men.
And I think that's where we're heading when we talk about true equality, is that we have somehow this idea that equality is sameness, that we need to be just like each other for equality. And that's not the case. Like, women have different roles, men have different roles, and they are equally valuable and equally important. It doesn't put one above the other. It's an equality that celebrates each other and loves spending time together and builds each other up, like fills the gaps the other person doesn't fill. And I think that complementariness, that's probably not a word.
That's okay. I like to make them up too.
Perfect. But I think that's a really beautiful thing that we don't want to lose. And I think then encouraging, like you say, young women to develop their gifts and talents. Don't be thinking about using their bodies necessarily, but use their whole selves, their minds and their creativity and all these things. And then realizing that they'll find a good man who's a match for that. And I think not rushing to do that even necessarily, but like you say, having those relationships with men where you can also encourage them to say, this is what women actually want in a man. This is what you should be working towards. You should also have goals and be using all of yourself and your intellect and your creativity and all those things. And then everyone will be built up, and we'll end up with a society where life is celebrated, where life is supported, and we have these communities of encouragement and, like you say, self-sacrifice.
Let's talk about pornography for a little bit, because that is the thing that happens is young women and men are getting sexualized way too young. And so then their minds are going in a direction that their bodies aren't ready for even, and their spirit definitely isn't ready for. So Pornhub, a Canadian company we can be proud of. Montreal company.
Yeah, so it is just this idea that it's entertainment. Sex is entertainment. Bodies are entertainment. They're commodities, right? They're not valuable individual human beings anymore. It's a commodity, and you're not seeing it as a person even. You're seeing it as an it, not as this is someone's daughter, someone's sister, right? This is a real person who deserves respect. And I think porn takes that away.
Well, I think it also gets the whole idea of sexuality started in their minds too young. It sexualizes them. They shouldn't be sexualized yet. It's inappropriate. It's a sign of improper babysitting. That the parents aren't taking proper care of their kids if their kids are going to be watching any pornography or even looking at naked bodies like that. That's just inappropriate, and they're not ready for that. They have a lot more work trying to understand. I mean, little kids, they're so precious. My son and his wife just had another baby, and they have a little daughter who's 2.5. And oh my goodness, just to see her while her mom was pregnant, she had so many baby dolls, and she'd say that her baby was in her tummy. And so, like she was playing this every day. Yeah. She was playing this mummy idea, getting ready for this baby. She had all her cradles and everything ready for this baby. So she was ready when that baby was born, but she had to play that for months and months and months. Kids, when they find something new, when she was 2, she played for a week just to get her shoes on. But every day. For a week.
We can learn a lot from kids about just that openness, right? That willingness, that perseverance, and just that love. Like they love people. Like they don't care what your background is, what you've studied, who you are.
They also believe in God.
They love people. Yep. They believe.
When his first little baby, my son's first little baby, was just in his carrier, it was during COVID, right? And I was the only one in their bubble. So, which I was very grateful for. But anyway, that's just the weirdness of the world. But I was praying the rosary, and he was fascinated. Right? There was no cynicism. There was no doubt.
Yeah.
He was just locked on, and the same with my daughter's oldest. I pray the rosary with her, and she's now 7, nearly 8, and she's just completely at ease with the concepts. There's nothing that has happened. Cynicism of the social world hasn't got to her yet. So like giving that groundwork to kids too, giving them that gift of the Heavenly Father that they can always depend on so that they don't feel anxious and alone ever. You don't have to be an individual then, because you're always in unison with the Father above. So you have this feeling of ease.
Yeah, and trust. And
so then you don't have to find something to calm you down or to rev you up. You stay in the moment, stay calm, stay with the Heavenly Father. I mean, I feel more and more that young people are searching for something. Go back an hour of church a week, right? Mm-hmm. Jordan used to say, oh, people, they think they're so high and mighty going to church for an hour a week. Now he says, an hour a week? Well, that's better than nothing. Right?
Yeah. And I think it is, like you say, that giving over, that ease, that calm, that knowing that you're always watched over and that someone cares for you, whether you mess up, whether you, any of those things. And I think kids have such a natural understanding of that, right? They rely on their parents without thinking they need to earn that love or that trust. Mm-hmm. And as we get older, we're taught, oh no, you can do it on your own. And then we get anxious and overwhelmed and we're like, right. Oh, I'm terrible at doing this on my own. But then we don't think to go to God and say, no wonder I was never designed to do this on my own. Yeah. I don't have the strength. And his power is made perfect in our weakness and he can work in us and watch over. Yeah, it's such a complete narrative shift, though, away from the autonomy and the individual to say, no, we're part of something so much bigger.
Yeah. Yeah, the whole idea of individual has really taken us down a very lonely path. Mm-hmm. And it's not necessary. We had a good call before we met, didn't we? I remember we had a nice conversation. Mm-hmm. Let me see. What do you think we could do to change? Does it have to come from the education system? No, probably not. It has to come from the home, right? Mm-hmm. The idea is that to stop people from thinking that they are not alone or they are individuals or that they can do anything they want with their bodies and that and that it's best to be making sacrifices for yourself rather than from yourself, for others, and putting yourself in service to others. Like, this has to come, I imagine, from the home. Can't come from the government.
I think that's always an interesting discussion. It's like, what's downstream from the other, like culture and law, and how do they intersect? And I think absolutely coming from the home, like you say, when you can teach a child from those foundational years to have that kind of a basis, that's going to be much easier than trying to convince a 30 or 40-year-old that what they've been taught their whole life is not serving them well. But then there is also the element where the law does reflect the culture and can inform the culture. So we have laws against things like assault and murder and theft and all these things, because as a society, we agree they're wrong. Mm-hmm. So there is value, I think. So our organization our pro-life organization is called We Need a Law, which often kind of rankles people. This idea of like, we don't need a law. We just need to change people's minds or change hearts. And I think that's absolutely true. We need to change hearts and minds. But there is a value in the law in saying as a culture, we do not accept this as good. And I think we have ended up in a culture where tolerance is almost idolized. Like, it's so important that you just affirm what other people are doing. Otherwise, you're seen as hateful or backwards or any of those things. And I think really being able to get back to a place to say, we have already agreed as a culture that not everything is an okay choice. That's why we have laws and why most of us follow the law. So where else do we need that? Where else as a culture do we need to say, okay, mutilating healthy genitals is not okay. Killing children in the womb is not okay. And yes, that's going to impact very real people. And that's going to have, there are people who are hurting and who are struggling with these different things, who it sounds very authoritarian or whatever to say, we're saying that's not a good choice. But I think in the end, if we can have those relationships and we can find that common ground to say, it's not out to get anyone. It's not out to say you're a bad person. It's out to say we are designed in a certain way, and going against that design is not good for us or for our society. And so I think there's this intersection of law and culture where we need to change hearts and minds. And that's why we try to work within communities and with local volunteers and stuff to say, you need to have relationships with people to talk about a lot of these issues, but also to work with the government and lobby them and say, hey, this is what first steps could look like. This is what it could look like to sentence someone who killed his pregnant wife because she wouldn't have an abortion, which just happened last month in Ontario. A man was sentenced for killing his pregnant girlfriend, but the baby could not be counted as a victim, even though he had tried to convince her to get an abortion. He knew she was pregnant. It was his child. He obviously intended to kill that child. And yet our justice system can't recognize that. So having the law say, as a society, we're standing up for women. And we are saying it's not okay because you value boys more to abort a girl because you're going to try again for a boy. We're going to say, no, that's not okay. As a society, we say we believe in women's rights, so we're actually going to put that in the law. And so I think there's this intersection we have to find where we need a willingness to say, I love you as a person, I value you as a person, but this choice that you're making, I cannot support. And finding that balance of truth and tolerance of many things. I think we do tolerate a lot of things. And I think we have a very secular society, and there are going to be a lot of variations in what happens. But there are certain things when it goes against God's design, when it goes against what's right, that we have to still be willing to say that. And I think it's getting harder and harder to say that.
Especially for children. You know, we can't really do anything, I guess, for adults. They make their own decisions. But for children, absolutely.
But I think even for adults, right? A lot of our laws, most of our laws apply to adults. We do tell them there are certain things they can't do, or there'll be consequences. And that also involves their own bodies. Like my rights to my body end where, like, I can't decide to use my body to hit someone else or abuse someone else. That's saying, no, you can't make that choice. That's not an okay use of your body. So I think we do legislate adults a lot too. A lot of the things coming up, like you say, not having to tell a parent about certain prescriptions or about medical treatment is something that we could work on. Like, can someone just go and get gender transition surgery without parental consent? Or can someone go and get an abortion without parental consent? So in Saskatchewan, they had like a school nurse drove a girl to get an abortion. Her parents didn't know. They didn't know why she was spiraling into depression. She was really not doing well. And I think a lot of that breakdown of the family, we start to see what encouraged when they remove parental consent or even parental notification from the picture. They're encouraging the breakdown of the family. They're saying your family can't be trusted. This is not, you can trust the government. And I think that's never going to be the right way of moving things.
No, that's right. You just want things to be controlled more at the local level. If things get too far above the local level, it becomes authoritarian, and you don't want that. You don't want top-down.
No, you want the culture to be going with the law. Absolutely. You want it to be something that we
right. You
can
want to
agree
be
on.
as local as you can be, and the family is the most local level of community that we have, and then we have the community around where we live. So then there's that, and so you want to keep things as local as you can. You want the guidance to come as locally as you can, and as we have lost, as the families have, as mothers have left the home really, and so they've left their communities. So the communities and the families aren't as cohesive as they were. Then we've felt like there's a reason to have top down. Well, that's what's going to happen. You know, women, we have no idea just how important we are, because here we were in the family, in the community, keeping everything running in an efficient manner with the help of everyone else that we were associated with, the grandparents, the aunts and uncles, the clergy, all of that. So we were informing one another when things went astray. We could discuss and find a common ground again. Like you say, a common ground. But then women were told, oh no, you have to have a career and you have to go to work. So you got to leave your community. You can, find someone else to take care of your kids or not have them at all. And that'll be the best thing for you. Well, now our families and our communities are fractured, and we've come to a point where then there's top-down laws that have to govern what the communities do, and they don't want that. Well, the reason it's there is because we left our responsibilities in the beginning.
Yep.
Yeah.
I always think of that. There's a quote, something to the extent of, you're replaceable everywhere but at home. And I think that's true. If I were to quit my job tomorrow, they would fill that spot, no problem. if I were to be hit by a bus and my family no longer had me, they would notice. Like, it's just I often remind myself that. And I think for all women who have children, that is the one place you're irreplaceable. Like you say, you get so much love back and so much. Yeah, when you are giving a lot. Obviously, it's not easy to have children and it takes a lot, but I think you get so much more back. And I think that we have to bring back that narrative that women are not replaceable in the home. Daycare is not a replacement for parenting. And yes, there absolutely is a time and a place where it's necessary. If there is not a husband and a wife, if, say, a single mom is struggling to do that, but then maybe we need programs where it's like, you know what, we're going to extend maternity leave until your kids are school age so that you can be home in those formative years and you aren't expected to be in the workforce. Or maybe we need to look at different solutions that we can say, this is important to us as a society, that mothers can be home with their children and can have those formative years of teaching and guiding.
So do you think, though, that having a policy of maternity leave for 3 years because the father is absent is going to help restore the family or make it less likely that it's even necessary?
That's a good question, because if the father is already not feeling a responsibility in that place, it's a good question, because I think it's something that women have to want. They have to want to have that guiding role in their children's lives. So how as a society, how do we equip them for that? How do we make that work well? It's not an easy.
No, and when this is part of this Snow White feminist narrative, is there's no prince in that story, right? There's the 7 dwarfs, but actually Dopey ends up being one of the heroes of the men. So, you got to think about that's the story, that the one dwarf that was Dopey, so not
kind of mocked and
not able to have responsibilities and stuff like. So this kind of narrative that we have of men now, that men they're not stepping up to their responsibility, and that could very well be, but it's more complicated than that. Mm-hmm. It's definitely more complicated than that, because in the Snow White story, she has to serve these nondescript men who are hardworking men who end up saving her when the queen makes her bodice too tight. They save her from that. And when she has this comb, this poison comb, this narcissistic spell that the queen puts on her, the dwarves save her from that too. But when she eats the apple, they can't save her. So they put her in a glass box. This is the Grimm's fairy tale. Yeah. They put her in a glass box, and the prince comes along and he sees the beauty. Mm-hmm. Even though and they say how creepy that is, kind of necrophilic, because he decides to take Snow White away in this glass box, even though she might be dead. But that's not the point. The point is that her beauty is such that he wants to preserve the beauty. And so he takes the beauty with him, because men are searching for beauty, adventure, and a battle. That's what, like, the 3 components of a grown man are. So they, so the men look for their beauty. They want to have an adventure, and they need to have a battle. So that's where, a woman can support a man to do the difficult things that he has to do to provide for his family. And women aren't doing that anymore. We don't know how powerful women are. They are the people who keep the community together, but they're also, women are a creature that makes a man.
Absolutely. And that's why I think that complementariness, that I don't have a word for.
That's a good one.
That they need each other, right? Like, you won't have more men without women having men. And you support and encourage each other. You have different gifts and strengths. And to be able, men need something to fight for. They need a goal and a purpose.
They need a reason to go down and do something difficult and dirty.
Yeah.
And why would they do it if they don't have a wife and a kid to take care of? Like, why bother?
Yeah.
Why do something difficult that's going to be backbreaking
Yeah.
if there's no reason? Well, the reason is, again, a man wants to sacrifice himself to his wife and his child, just like a woman wants to sacrifice herself to her child and to her family.
And if you're both living in that sacrificial, that other-centered way, it's such a
then
different...
what you get back is abundance of
Absolutely.
life and love. And those stories that are at the basis of our society that we've decided to turn away from, those are sustaining stories. And that's what sustains us because life's going to there's going to be trouble.
Yeah.
There's going to be trouble, and the world is going, like the earth is going to split beneath you. And you're going to want to have put down really bonds that cannot be broken. And the only way to do that, when you go to someone in a work situation, you want something from someone. What's the best way to get something from someone? Find out what they need and offer it to them. Right?
Yeah.
We've forgotten the whole narrative, and we've gotten so self-absorbed. And all of these things, abortion, euthanasia, for goodness sake. We just put my father, my sister, Jordan's father, and Jordan's mother, we're burying the last two this summer. I wouldn't have missed a moment with my mom and my sister, even though they didn't talk for, I don't know how long, 5 years maybe?
Okay.
Right? Like you had to really go there and be with them. My sister at the very end, I went to visit her in the nursing home. My other sister, luckily is a palliative care nurse, so she took care of my sister for years before she finally, she has a husband and so she put her in the nursing home, but within walking distance of our house. So, still taken care of. Anyway, I went to visit her, and she's just so separate from everyone now because she's so little and within herself and stuff. But I held on to her hands, and I got real close, and I bumped my head against her thigh like this, just, like a little game, right? Bumped my head. And then I kind of looked up, and I saw her looking at me, and her eyes got really big. Oh. And she sat back, and she thought, we'd connected,
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, it was, and you think, this person, they're done. It would be a gift to stop them from suffering. Yeah.
They're still there, hey?
It's debatable.
But like you say, that you showed up, you were other-centered. You showed up, you took the time, you made those connections.
Right.
I think that's what our society is missing when they...
And there's such beauty there.
Yeah. And I think when we advocate for euthanasia, it's people who, in a way, they don't want to show up, right?
And people who, I've seen people who are suffering and who think they're a burden, right? But see, that's why you need other people around you to love you, to say, you're not a burden. I love you.
Because we put too much stock in what we can do. We say, if I can't do, I'm a burden. And we need other people to say, no, you don't need to do to be loved. You are loved and you're not a burden.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So keep telling each other that. That's, yeah.
Yeah, euthanasia, our euthanasia, I don't know. You'll have to tell me. Are they starting to treat people with depression through euthanasia in Canada?
So as of 2027, that's when the law is supposed to extend to people with mental illness. So they've delayed that now a couple of times, which has been really exciting, something we've worked on with the Member of Parliament too, to introduce a bill delaying that. So it was supposed to come into effect in 2024.
Yeah,
That's now been bumped. And so now it's after the election.
Guys that did that?
Yeah, so we were involved in that.
Much.
Yeah. So really thankful to see that. And also there is now talk that could still be removed completely before it comes into play. But we do still have euthanasia. They call it track 2. So for people with disabilities or chronic illness can request euthanasia and are in increasing numbers. So I think we're at like 15,000 Canadians have been killed by euthanasia. It's just the numbers that go up every year. And now it's just this real ableist society of like, we think your life is not as good, then it's okay if you would like to commit suicide. And it's just this really awful narrative. And disability advocacy organizations are really speaking out to say it takes away from people wanting to do research for funding to try and treat any of these disabilities, because we can just use euthanasia and then we don't have this anymore. Abortion comes into play because a lot of people will abort if they're told the baby may have some kind of abnormality. They think that's not a life worth living. We have this kind of ableist idea, and that's who's making the laws, is able-bodied people saying, I wouldn't want to live like that. I'd want to be able to have euthanasia. And people who are living like that are saying we have fulfilling full lives and communities. But they're getting, when they go into a hospital, if you're in a wheelchair and someone else isn't, and you go in with the same other ailment, one person can be offered assisted suicide and one won't. And it's this really awful, basically bias and discrimination towards people who are living with disabilities. So a lot of work is also being done to repeal that, to say, no, again, as a society, what do we say is okay? And now our law says this is okay, but as a society, is this what we want to be?
And have we tried everything?
Yeah.
With these people who are suffering?
Exactly.
Like, really? Are they still eating like candy every day?
Well, and that's, some people are choosing it because they have a disability that qualifies them, but actually the problem is they don't have adequate housing, or they don't have adequate food, or they don't have adequate social support, but they're qualifying because of their disability. And it's really, we're just not giving them the services they need to live well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's for sure. There are, I only eat meat.
Okay.
Since I was very, very sick. Before I was very, very sick. Not long before I was very sick, though, I stopped eating all plants. And a lot of my symptoms that were bothering, chronic symptoms like arthritis, went away.
Okay.
Once I gave up salad, which was the last thing I was eating, it was just lettuce and olives and cucumbers and olive oil and apple cider vinegar. That was my last food. When I gave my last plants, when I gave those up, within 2 weeks, my knees started to loosen.
Okay.
And it took about 2 years for my knees to heal.
Yeah.
But it was in that time that I also was diagnosed with cancer. But with a cancer that was supposed to kill me, but didn't, because I wasn't eating any carbohydrates. And now they know that it's a metabolic disease. And bipolar, that's another thing that is cured, put into remission, whatever you want to call it. Anyway, it will go away if you get rid of the plants. Because plants they cause inflammation in your body, and everybody has different ways of showing inflammation in their body, and however they get sick, whether it's arthritis or whether it's psychological problems, right? So everybody's different in what they exhibit as a disability.
Right.
But if you limit what they eat, first of all, like a very, very strict plant-free diet for a number of months, and then see how they're doing, instead of filling them full of pharmaceutical drugs and trying to quell down the symptoms
without actually fixing.
Take everything away except for one thing. Mm-hmm. And the one thing you can eat is meat, because it's got everything that you need. So just simplify back to one variable, meat and water. And if the symptoms go away, then you can add things in and to see what happens. But we are taking a shortcut. Mm-hmm. Oh, well, we'll just euthanasia. You're sick. Euthanasia.
Yeah. And I think we have this sense of like, there's no purpose in suffering. If we're suffering, we should just end it. That we want to escape it as quickly as possible. There's no sense of there might be a purpose in this for ourselves, for others, for our community, that we might be learning something. We might have to try something different. I think we all want to be comfortable. We want it to be better. And so we, like you say, we try and take the shortcut route. And
and it's no wonder, but that's not a well thought through decision, right? And that's when we need to look to our communities and to our close friends and talk through how we're suffering to see if there's a different way to look at it before we go down these avenues of euthanasia, because that's a drastic and final decision. So there's many decisions that take you there, and having a community, a loving community, is very, very helpful to show you another way, another reason for life.
In so many of these issues, that we come back to that community and that other-centeredness and that being willing to talk, being willing to listen, having that.
Yeah, and with all of this social media and stuff, it takes us away from our communities as well, right?
And I think that's part of the issues. People are finding these online communities that end up just being an echo chamber of things they agree with, rather than engaging in a real diverse community and having to have those uncomfortable conversations sometimes, but it's just much more real. And I think online gives some people really necessary community, but can also very quickly become just a self-fulfilling, especially if you see things like the gender communities and stuff, where they really encourage kids to isolate themselves from their families because they don't support you, or just, don't listen to that because of this. And you end up with this very divisiveness again. And it's not even a real, in the flesh and blood community that's going to support you, but they're just online. And I think while there's value in online communities, it can be very dangerous too.
Yeah. Well, I wonder now with AI, because it's less likely that you're talking to a person online than it used to be, that in-person communication will become the necessity. I'm wondering if that will be the case.
Yeah. Although they say for so many people, it's so hard now because they aren't used to people they disagree with. We have a hard time. Yeah, when people feel challenged, like you say, very quickly, they feel provoked, they get angry, they get very volatile, the way they would in, say, a comment section online.
Right. When there's nobody to argue back, they can get as volatile as they want.
Which you can't be like that in real relationship. And so it's actually, people are going to have to relearn in a way how to live in community with diverse people.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and I don't think young people who've now grown up with a computer, because they have big challenges to realize. So that's something that parents really have to keep an eye on, because that's a different way to grow up with all of these online bots everywhere. Let's try to keep it in person.
Yeah, I think that a lot with my kids, that constant connectedness that you actually have to deliberately cut off, to say no, to be present in the moment. You can't always be connected elsewhere. You need to be just where you are.
So what haven't we talked about? You tell me, because you had lots of things on here.
Yeah, I feel like we've covered a lot, so I don't know.
Let's see. So let's see. So we have an election coming up, and we have, some real problems with the Liberal Party's new candidate, who said he was an outsider, and turned out that wasn't true. That he's put himself forward as someone who we could depend on, but turns out that he's been orchestrating behind the curtain, is a WEF writer, not just a puppet like Trudeau, but a man who has orchestrated a lot of the DEI policies.
Yeah.
And his number one issue from his book Values is carbon. And so he wants to keep 3/4 of the world's natural resources in the ground.
Okay.
Right? Like he's completely not the right guy. He's just completely not the right guy. Whether Pierre Poilievre has all the answers, well, nobody does. Nobody does.
Yeah.
But this guy, and the legacy media, that's a problem with the legacy media, is, they're more apt to support the Liberal Party because they were being paid in that direction before. So that's and a lot of the older people are going to still feel that way. And so they're going to be voting in that direction. So we really also have a lot of work to do in speaking with people today to be informed, to the really the basic values. Because Mark Carney, his book was called Values.
Yeah.
Right? Problem is he doesn't have ethical values. He has political values.
Well, and I think that's often the problem in an election period. People will say, my personal beliefs don't matter. And I think, of course, your personal beliefs matter. They should underpin every decision you're making. They should frame your worldview. We should know your personal beliefs.
Yeah, because it's intention. That's the most important. Where are your intentions coming from? Are they coming from money or power? Or are they coming from what you can do for your fellow man, which is, more of an ethical intention. But it starts with the intention. And if the intention isn't right, then it doesn't go in the right direction.
Yep. And I think that's what's always so interesting in an election is, well, in politics in general, is just this couching around issues and this unwillingness to really speak directly unless it's right in line with the party line. And there's this real, I feel like Canada used to have a more robust political debate happening. And I feel like it's become much more divisive and polarized over the decades. And I think it's hard now even to know how engaged people are with elections. We know voter turnouts are going down and down. So that's why we always encourage people, get to know who's in your riding. You're not voting for the prime minister. You're voting for a person in your riding, and you want to know what they believe on different issues. Like we talk about going local again and saying this is your representative in the government now. So do they represent your beliefs? Are they willing to listen to you? Even if they disagree with you, are they willing to hear your beliefs? Are they willing to consider them? And I think whoever becomes the leader, so far, at least at this point, both seem to have very, very tight control on party, like what people are saying. There's a lot of the back room, don't say this publicly, don't say that, only share our things, right? And I think the political world in general needs real directness for someone to say, this is what I believe, this is why I believe it, this is what I will do with that belief. And I care about serving the Canadian people. This is what I think that looks like. And I think too often we end up with attack against others rather than focusing on what they're going to do themselves. It's more just to scare people away from voting for the other guy rather than saying what I'm going to do as a leader. So yeah, election period is always really interesting. It is a really unique opportunity to bring up a lot of these issues to say, hey, would your government repeal euthanasia for mental illness? Would you take that out so that doesn't happen?
Yeah.
Would you be willing to take away euthanasia for those with disabilities and get rid of that ableist policy? Would you be willing to say we should be able to charge criminals who murder a pregnant woman with 2 murders because there is a preborn child that he knows he killed? We can ask those very specific questions and we can try and get a sense of where people stand. So we really encourage people to reach out to the candidates in their area. Often they host all candidates meetings or they host like a coffee social, things like that, where they're actually soliciting input. So it's like, as Canadians, we can use that opportunity to ask those questions and see how they respond. Yeah.
Yes, that's a very good idea.
So it's a unique opportunity, and it's also always an unstable time too, right? Because you don't know where things are going. Nothing's really happening progress-wise because everybody's focusing on their election campaign and not actually working. And so it's always a funny time. But yeah, it is a really good opportunity these people want your vote. So yeah, ask them why they should get it.
Yeah, because these are deep and critical questions to the livelihood of the people in this country. It really will make a difference in terms of where we as a culture go. Are we going to keep being a culture that kills people who are vulnerable, whether through euthanasia or abortion? Are we going to keep allowing medical transitions for minors, even though tons of other countries around the world are pulling that back and saying this was not a good idea? Are we going to legislate so that we need different age restrictions on access to pornography? There's lots of opportunity to do that, to say these sites need more accountability. Lots of these issues that we work on, they're not easy questions, and they're not just about how much tax are you going to cut if you become the government, but it's saying what as this culture do you think we need to value? Like, where are we on valuing life, on protecting vulnerable people? And I think those are the bigger questions, bigger even than how much tax we have to pay. Yeah, that's a whole nother conversation, isn't it? Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's really
nice to meet you.
You too. Thank you.